my delightful conversation with Kanyali Ilako, a pioneering sports psychologist in Kenya. In this part, we continue on our thread of sports psychology, but then we bring it a little further home to talk through some of the challenges that this field is having in Africa. I welcome you to enjoy. So to go to the other half of sports psychology itself, um, and here I'll be interested to hear some of your thoughts around how some of the skills you develop in sports carry over to life. We've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about being able to um, appropriately contextualize losses. We've talked about the impact of early specialization, and we see this happen a lot in even our educational system.
Yeah.
We're taught in one way as opposed to, but the issues in life that we have to deal with are multifaceted, and so early specialization in that sense also you have to keep an eye out for its wrong effects.
Yeah.
So and then overall, I also think that being able to understand the psychology of things, the underlying psychology of things, really is a good way to view life. Just generally, how would you say that sports psychology, or like some of the things that you learn in sports psychology, the skills, how do they carry over to life, and what kind of experiences have you seen of like people being able to transfer some of the skills?
Yeah. So yes, like you're saying, psychology is such an important. I usually tell everybody I can have a conversation with about this matter. If you can at least even take like a course, a class, or anything to do with just like general psychology,
Mhm.
because it's basically understanding how the human mind affects human performance, right? And we are naturally social people. Like there's nowhere you're going to go that you will not interact with at least one human being, and you find a lot of conflict that could have really been avoided if you just took time to understand this person or this particular situation. So that's on the psychology side. On the sports psychology side, we are basically working with, so we are giving so some of the skills we enhance, like I mentioned earlier, one of them is goal
I like
setting.
that you use enhance, not yeah.
So the other one, so one of them is goal setting, because for me, I feel like you can't do anything, or there's no point in starting something or continuing something if you don't have a goal. Like it's just as easy as that. Otherwise you'll just keep running around in circles and not understanding
you don't
why
have
you're
a
here.
map, you don't have a destination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then some of the others we do are energy management, so like anxiety management. So for some sports you need to be really like energized, and for some sports you need to not be. So for example, rugby, you need to like be like extremely, you need to have this burst of energy, whereas for shooting or like archery, you need to be a lot less like like physically like aroused.
Yeah.
That sounds strange, but yeah. So you see, you have to know, so it's, you have to know the sport and the person. So like so there's energy management. The other one is stress management, like I mentioned, how the life of an athlete can get a bit crazy. So like we work on like stress management, effective stress management techniques. And then you see a lot of people just assume, and especially with the people that I've worked with, oh my gosh, they just say, yeah, as long as I like drink or like, go smoke or like, this, they have such, and they're like, I'm fine the next day. And you're like, you don't realize what doing that over time, how it's going to affect your performance later, or just generally your well-being, The others now, like with the younger generation, like we work on like self-confidence. Self-confidence is really important because you're just getting into this space where you have to compete to get and then if your confidence levels are a bit low, you're not going to be able to get there, because you'll get so many no's or so many losses, as we were talking about. And so you can see all these skills, you need to transfer them to life. Anything that you do in life, you need to be able to manage your anxiety, you need to be able to manage your stress, you need to be confident, you need to have goals. So that's how you're able to
resilient.
Exactly. That's how you're able to like transfer the skills. Yeah.
Great. Two things that really stand out to me, that I think about sometimes when I do sports is, and I do boxing, I do weightlifting, I run every once in a while. I get into whatever it is that I can get into at any point. But two things that really have been very astute metaphors for life have been the importance of stress and rest.
Mm-hmm.
That balance is almost yin yang. You
Yeah.
have to challenge. I was telling one of my friends yesterday that a lot of these things have to do with biological adaptations, and so you have to trigger your body's adaptive response. But then you also have to rest appropriately, you know, and you can take that directly into the world of work, for instance, where you're just like, oh, this is the superstar of the organization. He's always working.
Mm-hmm.
He's always delivering. But then he's not resting, and then there's burnout. There's all of those things. So yeah, I really think the more I hear this, the more I think that if I have kids, whether or not they're going to be professional sports people, they would get into some sports for the types of skill set that they can carry over into life. And another thing that you said that really struck me again was the walking backwards thing, because sometimes even in dealing with challenges at work, you have to be able to break things down. In psychology, sometimes they call it first principles thinking. To be able to break things down to the first principles and actually piece out the elements of the thing, so that you can then say appropriately, and then you can then piece it back together, almost in a top down, bottom up type of approach kind of way. So thanks for selling me totally on sports with kids and things like that. Ironically, actually, as a segue, my sister-in-law told me today that they just registered one of my nieces for gymnastics, and I was kind of excited. I was like, oh my god, I'm having this sports conversation today on the podcast. But bringing him a little bit home to Africa, you know, like, what was it like when you told your parents you wanted to be a sports psychologist?
You know, my parents have always been supportive. That's I think, like,
kudos.
Yeah. So they've always told us to, like, do whatever. They've provided us, like, the space to, like, experiment. Also, my parents were sports people. Like, my dad played tennis for the country. My mom used to swim. So I think they understood the importance of sport in life. But I don't think they thought that I would actually go all the way, you know, with it. So I remember initially, like, there's a bit of, like, hesitation, because also, like, what is sports psychology? Who's doing that here? Where are you gonna work? What are you gonna do? Yeah. So there was, of course, that, like, hiccup and whatnot, but they've always been, like, extremely supportive. So they're just like, okay, yeah. And plus, they've seen me, like, I guess, you know your children, you know, so you're just like, okay, this one, she'll just create the space for herself, you know. So it's been good in terms of that. But in terms of, like, generally the population in Kenya, because one, it's still very, very new. Like, I would say, I think I'm pioneering. Actually, no, not I think. I know I'm pioneering it here. So you can imagine.
Speaking to a pioneer.
A young. Yes. So you can imagine a young, and why I say I put young in quotes is because I don't think I'm young, but you see, the people who have led sports are still the people who are leading sports when I was in sports, you know. So you can imagine it's been what, 20 years? Because I think I started my swimming career when I was like 10. And then, so I'm like, it's been all that, like, that time, and you're still seeing the same faces in the space. So you can imagine coming back and you're meeting these people with sadly old school, yes, exactly, the perspective. So it's been like, it's been a bit of a challenge to, like, try and, like, get them to see and understand and, like, you know, and then also on top of that fact, we're talking about psychology. Who in Africa, you know, they always say it's a white man's problem. It's we go back to the West, you know, like, here we just say, no, tough it out, you know, why are you talking about your feelings? Why you know, and then a lot of the people or the athletes and the coaches I have to deal with are mostly, I wouldn't say all or some, or like, some to most, still from, like, maybe, like, less exposed backgrounds, you know. So that has been the challenge around it. However, I've managed to, like, kind of get through it. You know, you just have to, like, bang on doors and walk through, and so finally now I'm, like, working with I'm the sports psychologist for the Olympic team, the team that's preparing to go for these Olympics. We hope coronavirus acts up. So I would say, like, yes, it's been an interesting, challenging journey, but I've loved every, like, because I'm so passionate about it. And having been an athlete myself and missing out on this particular thing, I'm like, no, I just want to, like, you know, show people and give back and whatnot. So because I'm passionate about it, it helps, you know, when the challenges come and the beatdowns come, it's like, okay, it's okay. We can, we can start again. We can do it.
You
Yeah.
Go back to your rest, stress routine,
Yes. Yes.
and come back stronger.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and again, just to riff off of that metaphor of sports and life, like you go to the gym, you strain your muscles, and then you have to feed your body appropriately. You have to give yourself the appropriate environment to be able to grow, and then you rest appropriately, and then you grow.
Yeah.
Right. And
to add on to that, though, it's important to note that everybody is different, though. So even with the mental skills that we've talked about, and even now when you're saying like the rest from the gym and whatnot, it's so important to understand yourself. Or if you can, I mean, there's the lucky few who get maybe not so few now, but there's the ones who can get a trainer, somebody who has professionally studied for it to be able to now get the scientific aspects, like the measurements and whatnot of what you need to do and how long you need to rest.
Yeah.
So just this, I can't do your regime, I can't like say I'll work out 6 days a week and then rest 1, maybe for me I'll need to do 4 and rest 3.
Yeah.
And so it's just the same way as with your mind. You have to understand. And so that's why I say even within like the same team, so let's say the same football team, yes, they're a team and you want them to produce, the results of a team, you still have to work with the individuals because they're all very different, so you still have to come up with individual plans, even if it's, within the team setting. So the rest and stress is different for very many.
And one thing is I've always kind of had a disdain for one size fits all approaches because I've always believed that things need to be tailored appropriately. And again, that spans past just the realm of sports, as it were. But to go back to my question, the reason why I asked how people initially took like your announcement as wanting to go to sports psychology is because, like you said, it's not really an area that is focused on in Africa. I wonder if that overall impacts the performance that we generally have as a continent in sports.
I definitely think so. Look at all the teams that travel, all the Western and American teams. On the bench, they always have a team doctor, a physiotherapist, and a psychologist. Like regardless. And even some of the teams, at some point, they remove the coach and the psychologist is the one who takes over during competition. So, and you can see how, that has impacted their sport or like the growth of sport in those countries
in those areas,
versus here. So it's definitely something that I would say is extremely important because again, at the end of the day, sport is a large percent mental. A large percent. Some of them say 80, some say 90. Like it's a large percent mental. And if you are not training your mind as well as you're training your body, there's only so much your body can do. There's only so much it can get to.
So what would you say are like the current gaps in the sports psychology space in Africa? Are the challenges funding challenges? Are they knowledge gaps? Are they structural issues? I mean, they're all linked. But if you were to piece them out as to like the stronger factors.
If we're talking about Africa generally, I would say, South Africa has always been slightly ahead. They already have like several, sports psychologists in different areas working with different teams. So let's bring it back home.
Exactly.
You can imagine one sports psychologist. Okay, now we are 2. So 2 sports psychologists having to work with the thousands of teams, even we have to rest, So I think the challenge there is one, people thinking, where am I going to work if I go and study, So yes, I'll go. First of all, there's no program for sports psychology here. Everybody who wants to study it has to go abroad. I mean, there's the one-off courses, within the general psychology degree, but that's also very rarely in only certain universities. And then, so you're imagining, okay, so if I go out, where am I going to come back and work? If I'm not absorbed into the systems there. And then 2, yes, so because of that, you're like, okay, yeah. So people, and then another thing I've found is that maybe they see it as threatening. So why I say this is because there's a bunch of coaches I have approached and I've told them, this is what I do, this is who I am. Let's work together to enhance your team. But they see me as a threat, like I'm coming for their job.
Almost like
and so it's almost, and I'm like, no. So I think about the knowledge gap. There's a knowledge gap because I'm like, no, I'm just helping enhance the performance, and they're like, no, I'm the coach, I'm the psychologist, I'm the parent, I'm the this, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm also reducing the load for you. You're
Mm.
also a human being with your own things to do.
Yeah.
So if I reduce that load and enhance this one for your
Mm.
athlete, it's an all-round win.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also the whole aspect of it still being an African, you know, going to
Yeah.
see someone, you know, it's still very an African. So,
Mm.
but like I said, I mean, times are changing, people are seeing. So I hope that people have now been asking me, you know, more questions about like, oh, I want to now study like psychology. Undergraduates
Mhm.
have reached out to me and they're like, I would like to master in what you're doing and
Mhm.
blah blah blah. So I'm like, okay, this is nice. At least
Mm.
like we're creating like, and it's also, by the way, a new what do I call it? A new stem off of psychology. So you know, you'll have psychology, then you'll have like clinical psychology,
Yeah.
educational psychology, and then now sports psychology is the newer one in the psychology field. So it's not just here that it's, even in the West, even though they've, you know, taken it a lot faster, it's still slightly newer. So there's still some of those
Yeah, but on the perspective of, or from the perspective of overall countrywide performance in sports, do you think there's like a clear gap that the government should be plugging, or do you think it's more structure that the government should provide from like national teams perspectives, or should that be a space where individuals are the ones pioneering, right? There's generally going to be that public private sector, but the way I say it, and not to preempt you too much, is that the government might need to structure out that as a legitimate space to then let people be able to flourish in it. Is that how you see it as
you
well?
see, the thing is it's a managerial thing, because yes, the government is now comes in when it comes to like, you know, major competitions like the Olympics, but then it's the federations, you know, so we have different federations. So you'll have the government, but then you'll have the federations for now, which are running the different sports.
Okay.
So some federations run really well and they understand that these are the needs of the athlete, whereas some are sadly money-making federations and they only see the athlete as a benefit, like as a money-making,
a means to an end.
And once this athlete is not giving them what they need, chucked out, you know. So I don't know if I would say it's a government thing or it's just generally just like the federations. Like there's been the conversations or the communication between the different federations and then the athletes and then the different sports and when they come, and so I think I would say it's a like the management and the lack of let me say, we only take care of our athletes when they're doing well. We forget them sadly when they're not, and that's when we need to reach out to them especially.
And that really was where I wanted to close this this episode. But just back to that, your last point, I think when I think of federations, maybe because I'm not in the space the way you are in, I almost consider them as part of like government as well, like governing bodies. So being able to have that structure on that level, you would say, is very, very important.
Yes, definitely. And also having people who understand the sport managing the government. Let me tell you, when I was swimming, I think the people who are like managing the sport, and they're still the same ones,
pretty much.
But the people who knew nothing about the sport, and I was like, if this is this space where we are having people who are managing us who don't have any idea for the sport, how do you think we're going to be taken care of? They don't care, you know. So also having people who understand the sport.
So before we go to like psychological care of former athletes, as it were, I'd like to get like your feedback on the importance of feedback, and the importance of appropriate interpretation of feedback. So would you say that being able to get feedback quickly and being able to reassess performance is one of the areas that, for instance, a coach or a sports psychologist will play a role in that is currently missing? In that I believe that the space between feedback is also like drawn out time for learning. And so how would you say constant feedback or getting adequate right, concise feedback impacts one in sports and in life?
I think getting feedback definitely is important, because how else are you going to know, have I done well, have I not, and I think it should be immediate usually, because a lot of the times, the human mind, we forget. So like, for example, I've just come out of, let's say, a tennis match right now, and I go to my coach, and it's advice, go to your coach immediately, so that they can give you the feedback. Because in these in let's say tournaments and sports, you'll play more than one game. It's not just one game, so it's important to get that immediate feedback, so that you know what next. Because you can imagine, after playing now all the games, and then now getting the feedback after, you would have missed a window where you could have probably like improved. But then again, like I said, it depends on individuals. Some people prefer to get, and that's why as a coach, or if you're working with any athlete, it's important to know and understand your player really deeply. And that's why it's also important maybe to work with like a psychologist, because then they'll be able to do like the screening, and then now have the discussion with the coach, and then you're able to now get a deeper understanding on this individual. Because some people, if you can imagine giving them feedback, and for the rest of the matches, they can't, like they're now focusing too much on that thing that you told them. Whereas for some people prefer, tell me this, I'll correct the mistake. So again, it's dependent on individual to individual.
And as a manager as well, you also have to be conscious of how you give feedback, so that you're not giving crippling feedback.
I say the sandwich approach always. The sandwich approach. So positive, negative, positive. When you're giving feedback. So you start off with, you played this really, really well. However, maybe on this front, you should have done that. But when you did this and this also. So now, So,
interesting. So to close off, I think I've had conversations with people that have talked about like former champion, this sport, that sport. However, they are not particularly living the champion life economically, right? Like, it's almost like athletes sometimes are not catered for appropriately after that point where they were winning us. And from your experience, what do you think is the psychological impact on some of those guys?
So let's start with, first of all, you've taken this, a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the athletes that compete internationally, are usually from more humble backgrounds. Okay. So they come, they're really talented, they go out there, they win millions. They come back home, you can imagine what millions will do for someone who has probably never even seen hundreds, you know? So they've come back home, and now, of course, and then a lot of them are young, let's say young people. So if it's a man, he'll be confused by, the women. I've seen it. If it's a woman, she'll get married. She'll get someone who will convince her, no, let's get married. Her career is finished because she's now pregnant, and now, that's it. So, and this is because we are not educating. You're taking somebody from a space and you're literally throwing them into the deep end. They do, and then when you remove them from the deep end, you're not giving them any debriefing. You're teaching them, this is what you can do, this is what you can invest in. So one, I think it's highly important for our federations, for our coaches, for whoever is in charge of the athlete. Give them some financial education. You don't have to go into the nitty-gritties of, like the depth of it, but help them through it, because it's bad out there. Like people go, but like I've seen and heard of names that used to top like internationally, like they're in international newspapers and and then you're looking at them now and you can't even recognize them. They've drunk themselves to stupor. Their money, like you literally don't know what they've done with their money in just such a short amount of time. But that's because they didn't know what to do with it, For them, they assume it will always be there because they've never seen this amount. So that one I will. And then also another one is, let's take care of our athletes. Like as soon as they get, like, for example, and I speak about these two particular ones, there was what's her name? This boxer, Conjestina, and there was also this NFL player, Daniel Adongo. So boxing and NFL is a high impact sport.
Yeah.
So of course, when you're receiving blows, there's bound to be something that happens in your brain, right? So, and if you don't take the appropriate medical care, or if you're not taken care of until it's too late, then you're going to face injuries that you're not able to come back from. And then even then now you're now taking, like, we don't, like, once they're, like I said, once they're not performing for us, or they're not like giving us, news headlines, we totally forget about them. So
and there's the psychological impact of even just being unplugged from something that was like the thing you were doing and known for.
The athletic identity.
Yeah.
You lost it.
The athletic
You've lost
identity.
it. You've lost your athletic identity. This is all you've known. Oh, so athletic identity and career transitioning. So the athletic identity is what you've been known for, and then all of a sudden you don't have it, and it's like feeling lost. And then another thing is, okay, so you've been removed from that, so your athletic identity can be lost due to, let's say, injury, or during now transitioning of your career. So retirement. So it's important to work with athletes through their retirement, so they're transitioning, and also when they get injured. Those are the two main, three, because of the financial aspects also. So those are the three main ones, I would say. That.
So even apart from just providing adequate sports psychology frameworks for our current athletes, we also need to ensure that even like the transitioning athletes or the transition athletes also still have some of that pool to be able to draw resources.
Because can you imagine starting your life at age 40? Because now you've retired from your sport at, let's say, 38, and now you have to start again at 40. And you're looking at your age mates who are 40 now, who have, that's going to take you to dark places.
I see. Especially like if you've specialized in these skill set over time, and then so that transitionary period, I think is very, very important. And I've also from most of the stories I've heard, I think it's very, very crucial to ensure that gap there is plugged appropriately. Sure. I feel like this is a very good point to bring this episode to an end. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Kanyali. This was a fantastic conversation.
Great talking to you. Thanks. Hi again. I hope you've enjoyed this 2-part series on sports psychology. One last thing. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. And also, please, feedback is welcome. Your comments, your thoughts. It would be really good to hear from you. Till we talk again, have a great one. Thumbs up.